Living with a disability can be very challenging at the best of times. But what's it like to live with a disability while also living in poverty? Ed Epp is the Executive Director of Hope and Healing International, and he joins me now to talk about those two very things, hope and healing. Ed, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
Ed, your organization just recently changed its name from Christian Blind Mission Canada, CBM, to Hope and Healing International. What led to that decision?
I think it actually came a complete circle to where we started. 110 years ago, CBM started with a pastor in what is now Iran, a German pastor, and he helped children get off the street, children with disabilities. And he actually demonstrated he believed in the sermon of love, creating ministry as Jesus did with acts of love. And hope and healing is Jesus's ministry. Jesus brought hope, Jesus brought healing, and that was the way Jesus evangelized the world, and that's the way we wanted to as well.
Now, your group has provided healing care for forgotten kids for over 110 years. What was some of the confusion you encountered around using the name Christian Blind Mission?
Well, for a while, CBM did mostly blind work, cataracts and eye work. In the last 10, 12 years, we've been moving to more holistic, all disabilities, and particularly children. And so I remember once I was being introduced at a gathering, and a mayor of a city turned to me and said, what's your name again? And I said, CBM. He says, what does that stand for? And I said, well, Christian Blind Mission, but we help all children. And he said, it's too complicated. And he walked off and didn't introduce us. And so we do work with prosthetics, 3D printing, that kind of thing. And I've had reporters ask me, what's a blind mission doing working with prosthetics? And so it was confusing. So we wanted to get back to what we really did and have a name describe us, because that first moment when you talk to someone is the moment when you can grasp what we're doing.
Now, you also talk about forgotten children. Who are the forgotten kids? Also, maybe share with our viewers a little bit about how poverty and disability are so closely linked.
Yeah, Forgotten Children goes right back to Ernst Christoffel, our founder, in his writings, and I love reading his sermons and his writings. He talked about the forgotten children. These were the children on the street with disabilities that had been abandoned by their families. And he actually lost his job as a pastor because he took them into his house. He asked the church if he could support the ministry for these children, and the church said no. He was there to minister to the Germans in Iran, and he actually quit his job and started the ministry on his own, and that led to it. So forgotten children are the children that are forgotten, and today you can still walk the streets around the world, and children with disability are forgotten. They're forgotten. They're left out of school. They're left out of medical care. They're left out of a lot of development agencies that work with children. They don't work with disabled children because that's too complicated. It's too. One organization told me there's not enough hope. And so that's what we're all about. Now, poverty and disability, the cycle of poverty and disability, if you have a disability, you are 50% poorer than your neighbor. Statistics around the world. So if you live in a slum in Kinshasa, Congo, everyone is poor. But if you have a disability in your family is 50% poorer than the rest of the people. If you are poor, a lot of times you have added incidents of disability because of lack of medical care, lack of prevention. So it's a vicious cycle that it has to be broken.
Now, is there a difference culturally in some of these poor nations as to how people with disabilities are viewed?
Yes. Two answers to that. It's an interesting question. First of all, a lot of countries think that people with disabilities are cursed. And we've actually had parents talk about their child with club foot that has been healed, and they say, you've removed the curse. And so they see it in spiritual terms. So yeah, a lot of countries do that. I always caution our own when I bring people to look at programs, because in our churches, we also have a view sometimes of disability as being caused by God. And so I say let's not be too critical until we examine our own, take the speck out of our, take the lumber out of our own eye before we look at the speck in others' eye. But yes, it's much more overt in a lot of countries.
Now, you talked about cataracts earlier. You talked about prosthetics. What other types of treatments and services does Hope and Healing offer?
Hope and Healing, we're child focused. So we're working a lot with children and are primarily going into the communities, finding kids with disabilities because a lot of times they're hidden. I have been to homes where the child is locked in the back. And so we find the children, we find out what medical intervention they may need, whether it's clubfoot, prosthetics, orthotics. Sometimes it's operations. A lot of times it's operations. Increasingly, we're seeing cerebral palsy. And so then we work with the parents or the mother or grandmother if the mother is gone. And we teach them therapy, and we try to get like walking aids, like walkers and things like that to help them. So it's all children with disabilities.
Now, the word Christian has been removed from your group's name. Is Hope and Healing International still a Christian organization?
I love the question. Of course we are. In fact, we would say that we're aspiring to do the same kind of ministry as Jesus. Jesus did hope and healing, and that's what we're all about. We don't want any confusion, and anyone that gets any mailings or communicates with us will understand right away that we're Christian. But in order to emphasize that, we added a tagline onto our name. It's Forever Christian. So it's Hope and Healing International, Forever Christian. Find that that's a very strong, probably a stronger way than just putting it in your name, of stating that this is your values. These are what you're about.
So you share the gospel. Do you also pray for physical healings? And do you work together with some of the local churches?
We believe strongly in working with local churches. In fact, I could talk about some of the chaplains that we work with in the hospitals. It's all local chaplains and from local churches because we think that provides a better home church to disciple the people as they come through their healing. Yes, we do pray with people, pray with and for our individuals, the clients. Whenever I'm in the hospitals, I attend the chapel devotional of the day. I invite other people to join me. I've been in the wards with children where the chaplain has led the prayers and I've participated. Yeah, that's very much a part of what we do.
Now, you still, I guess, work with people who are blind, but what specific type of help is provided? And are you able to do any eye surgery?
Yeah, we do a lot of eye surgery. Um, Increasingly, we're looking at the whole hope and healing through the lens of child focused. Now, in some cases, a lot of eye work is elderly. Just like in Canada, the older you get, the more eye needs you have, cataract surgery and that kind of thing. But in a place like formerly Swaziland, it's now called Eswatini, you have a whole generation, the adults that have died of HIV/AIDS. And so you have grandparents looking after grandkids and increasingly great grandkids. And if you don't help that grandmother or great grandmother restore her eyesight, she can't look after the 6 grandkids that she's looking after. And so again, through the lens of the child focused, we are still doing a lot of cataract surgery.
So, Ed, what are your hopes for the organization's future as you go out under this new name and identity?
Well, I think we want to do what we've always done, and that is to emulate Jesus's ministry on earth. We believe strongly that that we follow Jesus by doing acts of love. Our brand promise to the world is we value everybody as Jesus values them. And that's what we want to do is we want to go out and help all children and make a difference. I want a child that is helped by hope and healing to realize that they have value, realize they are loved by God, realize they are loved by Jesus just as my own children are. And if we can do that, I think we're on their way to healing.
Now, as someone who's had the privilege of traveling with the organization, can you share some of the more impactful recent stories from the field with our viewers?
Yeah, I just was in Ethiopia, in rural Ethiopia, a couple weeks ago, and their trachoma is because of lack of clean water, and I visited this one grandmother with a granddaughter. The granddaughter was 12. She had been living with her grandmother for 4 years, taking care of her grandmother because her grandmother was blind. blind from trachoma, and it was too late for the grandmother. Her cornea had been affected. And so here's this 12-year-old that is sacrificing children, sacrificing friends, sacrificing school to look after her grandmother. And she has to walk. There's no clean water source. We walk down this mountain to with her to get her water. She has to go at least twice a day for that. 12-year-old carrying these huge jerry cans. And the water she got was not clean. There were animals there. It was just a complete, and it was the striking thing to me is this girl brought the water up. We followed her down and up. It was a hot day, high altitude, and we got to the home, and the grandmother said, "Give them some water," and so she poured us a glass of water from what she carried as the only thing that she could give us. And it was very valuable, and I couldn't drink it because it was so unhealthy. And that village will get a well. That village, by next year, she will walk maximum 5 minutes to get clean water that will have water for the animals and water for her. And that girl will not get trachoma. That girl will go to school. She was a bright girl.
That's wonderful. Ed, how can people really help? Can they sponsor a child, maybe become a monthly partner, or maybe even make a one-time donation?
Yeah, if you go to our website, hopeandhealing.org, you'll see that we have what we call Healing Hugs, where you sponsor a child for a year, and that child gets the medical interventions, $30 a month. That child gets found, it gets the medical intervention they need, and so they get the start. And the hugs is we have a teddy bear that goes to the child when they get found, and a teddy bear that you take home with you. And you get an update on the child as you go. So that's been a very a good thing to see, and it's really fun for me to go to Ethiopia again and see these little teddy bears grasped in these hands, and realize that every time I see that, I know that child is being taken care of.
Wonderful. Ed Hepp, Executive Director of Hope and Healing International. Thanks a lot for joining me today from Waterloo, Ontario.
Thank you. It was great to be here.